You're listening to the Money Monopolizers podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. It's about time that we invest more in our financial literacy and work towards building generational wealth. If you think you're ready to do the same, then you've come to the right place. Alex, Marlon, y'all ready? Let's get this bread.
What's good, everybody? It's Alex Cunha here. We are back with episode 42 of the Money Monopolizers podcast. And I'm here with my co-host, Marlon Waltz. Marlon, hi.
Bro, you said that like you was hyped, like you ain't did one of these in a minute. And honestly, it has been a little minute since we recorded one of these, especially recorded one that just both of us solo. So I'm actually excited for this one because we have a lot of good information coming up on this episode. I know you thrilled for it because you've been talking about this for the past couple of days now. So I know we got a lot in store for y'all. So I'm doing good though, honestly. Like Purdue, I'm ready to be. I'm ready to be gone. I'm sorry, but all my friends here, listen. I want to leave like now. I'm tired. I'm ready to get on with my life, but I'm almost at the end. I got like a month left, and I'll be back in Houston before I know it. So, how's everything going with you, bro?
I'm good. I'm glad everything's going good over there. You finally finished with that place called school. That's how I feel about work though. But you know, it is what it is. But no, everything's going good. I can't complain at all. Healthy. Been safe, not broke. So, I can't complain. But I guess real quick, before we get to the episode, like you said, this is gonna be a solo episode. So, we haven't done one of those in a while, but I think the timing of this episode is definitely needed right now with the stuff that's going on right now. So, I felt like this is something we had to get out. So we kind of had a break from the guests and be back. Don't worry, regularly scheduled programming will be back hopefully next week. But for now, we definitely want to, get this message out because I honestly think this episode will be, I think it'll be my favorite one. And I think the information here will be like probably, if not the most valuable episode we've done. Like the stuff you take from this episode could change your life. It should change your life if you apply what we're about to talk about. But real quick, right before we get into it, I just want to talk about kind of what we've been doing as far as the businesses and all that going on. Because I know we haven't really even talked about that since we've been having a guest. But recently, I guess we closed the latest flip here in San Antonio, and it was funded actually 100% with private money. So that was the first deal we were able to, fund 100% with private money. And I for that, I just say shout out to the podcast, man. Shout out to the people, and just being able to put this content out has proved, to pay dividends in a great way. So being able to get private lenders and people that are willing to get or that want to get a better returns than their 401ks, all of that is definitely come from this podcast. I think a big part of it. So shout out to them. And so we're still moving along there. Hopefully we might even be closing on another one here next week or so, depending if I can secure some more private funding. But we'll see on that one. It's actually a street from the house we just got. So, but that's going good. I got the trucking business as well. That has been ups and downs just due to the market, a lot of it unable to control. But, it's one business that's recession proof. It's resilient proof. When things go down, they'll come back up. So I'm not really too worried about it. But
Yeah, on top of like all the business that you got going on, that's something that I'm thinking of a lot. As far as as I finish up my time at Purdue, I have a lot of extra time since classes are over. So I'm diving more into my own little business ventures, and I'm trying to prep myself up as I get ready to graduate from Purdue, and I'll start being able to act on those as I leave Purdue. So I'm definitely have those in my plans as well.
But yeah, let's get right into this episode though. So one thing I do want to say before we start, you will not get the full value out of this if you do not listen to the entirety of this episode. Even if it takes you a week, you got to listen to this episode. Because I know everybody don't listen to all the episodes in 100%. That's fine. But this one, this is the one that you got to do it for, right? And for me, I know I pretty much since the whole quarantine started in mid-March, I've been accumulating thoughts, writing them down. And this episode for me is the culmination of a lot of those thoughts for over the last literally 2 months. So I definitely got that I want to get into and just talk about. So yeah, without further ado, let's pop right into this thing. So there's going to be kind of two structures or two aspects to this episode, right? So the first part of this episode, we're going to kind of talk, number one, on the effect of what's going on right now on that it's having on businesses and how consumers are reacting to those, effects on the businesses, right? Because that's one aspect of this whole thing, that we're talking about adapting and thriving to a new world or getting left behind, right? Because that's either what's going to happen right now from this point on. You either have to adapt or you're going to get left behind, no matter if you're a business or a consumer. You got to adapt or you'll get left behind. And so that's the first part. And then the next part was kind of talking about more so the effect it has on an individual's future. And that's really the part you don't really need to listen to, because, the business part is not going to be as applicable to everybody, but it's still worth mentioning. So I think in order to kind of transition to that in regards to the business, I think the first thing that, is going to be happening in this space of business, right? Business owners are asking themselves, or they have to be asking themselves, social distancing thing is permanent, right? And that's like a permanent thing that we're doing. How is it going to be impacting your business model, right? How is this going to impact your bottom line? Because from this point on, there's going to be a new normal. Things will not go back to how they were before. This is going to be a new normal. And if you do not adapt to the new normal or finding ways to innovate, you will get left behind. Because the life cycle of business, that's just what happens in capitalism in capitalistic societies. The times we're in right now, the government is literally saving everyone. Every business that can get saved is getting saved right now. So these bailouts that the government is doing is keeping a lot of the bad apples alive. And I'm not necessarily a fan of that, because I think the natural course of business has to be to let those bad ones die out and rot so that new ones can come up and kind of continue the cycle, right? But the government's keeping businesses that need to get tossed to the side alive, because they're not innovating, they're not thriving, right? Because you look at like Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster didn't adapt to Netflix and on-demand streaming. You think about like BlackBerry, they didn't adapt to Apple and the touchscreen phones. Kodak, they didn't adapt to the digital cameras and Instagram. Sears didn't adapt to e-commerce like Walmart did, and Amazon, of course. Walmart was, they adapted very quickly and are doing very well in the e-commerce space, right? And then I always think about too, like the biggest fool of them all to me was Yahoo, because the Yahoo, in the early 2000s, they had multiple chances to kind of become like one of the top, conglomerates. They had an opportunity to buy Google in 2002, and Google's now worth over $1 trillion, right? If you look at Alphabet, that's their market cap. This is the time where you really have to pivot or you will fail. Even small businesses, right? Restaurants, the little guy with a pizza shop or the 2 pizza shops, you got to figure out how to pivot or you will fail. You have to be able to provide services differently than previously before, right? Airlines, right? They're going to have to find a way to make people feel safe if they want to get people back on those planes. Because people are not going to get on those planes if they're packed in there like sardines with everybody, coughing on each other like it is normally, right? You're going to have to innovate. Uber and Lyft, they're going to have to innovate. People are not in rideshare right now, right? So they're going to have to innovate. How are they going to make people feel more comfortable? Because I can guarantee you, if they do not innovate, Tesla will take over. Tesla will destroy them. And that's just what Tesla does, because Tesla is innovation. You look at I know one reason I want to get a Tesla is because when you buy a Tesla, you're buying an asset. You're not buying a liability. Because one thing that because Tesla is completely electric, and their whole, the Model S and the Model 3 and the Model X and the Model Y and all those cars, they all have computer systems, right? So literally with a software update, it's a new product. They have the Tesla Robotaxi, self-driving taxis. I can guarantee you, if Uber and Lyft don't innovate, you're gonna see taxis everywhere. They're gonna take over, because people would much rather get into a into a car with nobody, right? If they can just ride alone, then have to listen to an Uber driver talk about something, or just being in that situation, right? So that's something that's going to happen. And that whole robotaxi thing is Tesla has, because of that, they literally have the power to change their business model, right? Because once they implement that software update to where now anyone that owns a Tesla essentially has an asset to where they can put their car out on the market and let it go pick people up. Elon Musk said that can make each robotaxi has the potential to generate $330,000 over its lifetime. That is literally, you're buying an asset. You just bought a rental property as a car, and that's an appreciating. Well, I mean, I guess you wouldn't say appreciating because eventually, it is finite. But still, you're buying an asset. So they can literally change their whole business model, because now Tesla, they don't even have to sell. If they do that, they don't even have to sell cars to consumers, because the price of a robotaxi is going to be so much higher than the price of a normal Model S or Model 3. They don't even have to sell cars to consumers now. They can literally sell cars to corporations or want to buy robotaxis, and they can sell them for $150,000 or $100,000 now, because it's justifiable now that car is going to make you over $300,000. It's justifiable to sell this car for $120,000. So that's what innovation is, right? And this is what business have to do. And I think the whole thing about this whole coronavirus, this COVID thing, is this shift was all inevitable. Like where we're at now and what happened over the past however so many months, that was all inevitable. Like this digitalization, it was gonna happen anyway. But the COVID thing, it forced it. It's kind of like a cycle, right? Things just change over time. And this is something that began in the early 70s when the computers became as prominent as they are. That was the beginning of this. And now the COVID thing is literally just forcing its hand to say, okay, you took too long to innovate. I'm going to do it for you. And so now if you don't adapt and you pivot with this thing and you find ways to innovate in business, then you will get left behind. Businesses will fail. And that's just the natural life cycle of business. So that's what people have to understand. So that's my whole take on the business aspect of this all.
That was a huge perspective, especially with Tesla Robotaxi, because I'm thinking that like with Internet of Things and like how prominent that is now, you can always stay up to date if you are able to push new updates into your product. And like you would never go out. I mean, it's in the near future, you would never go out of date because you are always able to be innovative and push out like new things to keep your product fresh. And it's like it doesn't ever just perish over time because it's unable to be updated. So that's one big thing like that businesses need to be looking toward moving forward, especially. And I'm just thinking like coronavirus, if you think about it, it's news right now. Like that's the big thing, is coronavirus is like the main news, and that's like on all the headlines. But it's not the future though at the same time, because news, anything that you see on the news, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's, I don't know, like the number of cases that coronavirus has, in order for that news to get there, somebody had to like document that data and then type it up and then put it out there. By the time they put it out there, the news is already in the past. I'm saying all that to say that we're already looking into the future. Like currently, we're working towards something that's in the future. We're telling you past news, but we need to be preparing for what's new and what's to come. And that's that goes to your point of talking about pivoting. Like change, like for businesses, they need to start pivoting their business model and start changing based off what they've seen with the coronavirus and how people are going to like the new age. Like they see the change of an era that's coming, and because people are adapting to a new normal as coronavirus has like quarantined us, because people are honestly creatures of habit, and because no matter what situation you put somebody in, they always adapt to their surroundings. And I remind me of something. Honestly, I always believed in like Tarzan could be like a real thing, because if you place a baby in, no matter what environment you place a baby in, if they are like well fed and like if they're always taken care of up until they grow up, I really feel like they will adapt to their surroundings no matter what environment that they're put into. That's why a baby can learn any language in the world when they're put into that environment. I feel like Tarzan could do the same thing. Like if you could put a baby in the wild, they will learn how to at least communicate with the animals effectively. People are always adapting to their surroundings. So back in March, when we first were put into quarantine, we were like, oh man, this is terrible. How are we gonna live our lives this way? And in May, we sitting like, bro, I mean, it's another day. Like I'm chilling now. Like people are adapting, and the longer it's like that, the more likely people are going to start adapting more and more to this way of living. And so, if you think about it, people today are either unemployed, essential workers, or they're working from home. And so this is like revealing new things to bosses, to workers, and to the unemployed people. For bosses, they're realizing now that they can still run their business remotely. Like telecommuting is possible. They can still have effective workers without them actually having to come into the office. That's going to allow them to change their entire business model up as they continuously, or as they move forward out of coronavirus and quarantine times. Workers also are realizing that they can be productive away from work. They probably are, like for me, I feel like I'm 100 times more productive not going to work because I'm away from like people who like to talk in the work environment, or I'm just away from distractions. Like I can just solely focus on me. This may not be the case for everybody, but some people are realizing this, and they realize what works for them as they move to going back to work, like once quarantine is over. And the same thing for unemployed people. For people who are unemployed, I feel like they have a huge benefit right now because, like I said, I have more time because I'm able to work from home and I'm able to get my work done faster. So I have more free time. If you're unemployed right now, you have literally from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed to just do whatever, especially with the technology. And we'll get into a lot more later on in this episode. But if you don't see it that way, then you need to start, like, you really need to reevaluate your situation and like reevaluate your method of thinking, because understand that for every struggle that's in this world, there's an opportunity, and it's up to you whether you see it or not. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is like, if you were looking to start a business, though, I think that having an online presence to monetize from is like critical, though, because honestly, a lot of businesses right now are going to see that. Well, like you mentioned earlier, that the government is like bailing them out, but they're going to end up perishing inevitably, because if they're not able to thrive in this type of environment, then eventually they're just going to perish on their own, regardless of how much money you're pumping into them. It's all about understanding that there's opportunities out there and just trying to capitalize on them.
I think too that this whole thing should have probably even happened like a decade ago. Not the coronavirus. I'm talking about this transition. It was like, it's probably like a decade late. But that's why I said, like, this is kind of like one of those black swan events. 9/11, the dot-com crash, all of these things that kind of happened, coronavirus, these are black swan events that you can't kind of prepare for, right? But they force a change in the environment, right? And the people that are going to profit the most out of these are the people that are going to be prepared for this. I mean, because I think about Zoom, right? Because you think about Zoom. Zoom launched in 2011. And, Zoom, a lot of people didn't really know about Zoom until this year. Like literally 2 months ago, a lot of people didn't know about Zoom, which is crazy. But I guess if you have no reason to be video conferencing, then you wouldn't have known about it. But in 2019, they had only 10 million users in the last quarter of 2019. And then as of April, I saw that they had like 300 million users already in April, like daily. This is daily. So that's essentially saying the entire US, and their market cap now literally is worth more than all the airlines combined. 49 billion is what Zoom is worth. Now, I think it's highly overvalued because obviously that's based off of everything going on. When things get back kind of to normal, that's going to decrease. But that's what happens. Right now, all the airlines combined are worth 46 billion right now. That's highly undervalued in my opinion. But Zoom is worth more if you look at the data, right? But I say that to say, Zoom was launched 9 years ago. The guy had no idea this is going to happen. He just launched it because that's what he was going to do anyway, right? He didn't get lucky. The thing is, he was prepared, because the thing about luck is that luck is essentially just when preparation meets opportunity, right? It's just when you're being prepared for a certain opportunity, then you're able to capitalize and take advantage of it. Because you look at the guy, right? The CEO of Zoom, the guy that founded Zoom, his name is Eric Yuan, Chinese guy. He was actually just working in his purpose, right? Because what happened was he was taking 10-hour train rides to visit his girlfriend. So he said, damn, why don't I just develop a video telephone software? Because I don't want to take these 10-hour train rides to visit my girl, right? Then he heard Bill Gates speak in 1994. And from that point, he was inspired now to move to Silicon Valley. So he applied 9 times for a U.S. visa over the span of the next 3 years. Moved to Silicon Valley in 1997, and he joined WebEx. WebEx is just a company that essentially does the same thing as Zoom and Skype and all of these companies, right? Except they do it for corporations primarily. And when he was there, he became vice president of engineering. He pitched an idea for smartphone video chatting to the management, and he got rejected. WebEx was owned by Cisco. They rejected it, right? So he said, all right, bet. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go create Zoom. He created Zoom in, I think, April of 2011. And then 8 years later, 2019, it IPO'd. I think last April, they IPO'd. And in that moment, he instantly became a billionaire, right? And today, now he's worth $8 billion. He literally, 8 times his net worth over a year. And that's literally just because he was prepared for the opportunity. And so I'm not saying that everyone needs to go find $1 billion idea like Zoom, but I say that to say that you have to be, there's probably a lot of opportunities that you've missed in your life because you weren't prepared. I mean, I could say the same thing for myself, right? I say all that to say that this whole coronavirus thing, when you talk about opportunity, this whole coronavirus thing is a massive opportunity for people. And if you hear that and if you think anything cynical in any way, then that's this you could turn off the episode right here. You're not going to like what we finna say over the next, whatever, some odd minutes. So you could go ahead and, we'll catch you next week. But listen to the end to really understand what we're about to say, right? So if you want to hear how this is an opportunity, you got to listen to the end. I think the first thing I want to say, because think about this whole COVID-19 thing, right? What is it essentially? It's essentially a virus that no one can control that is in turn forcing a lot of people into fear of an economic downturn, right? And when you think about an economic downturn, who's going to really feel the effects hardest? I mean, we can think about it, right? You look at the wealth, look at the middle class, and you look at the poor, right? Who's going to feel the effects? I want you to think about that. Now, when we look at the wealthy, right, the wealthy people are only going to get wealthier from an economic downturn, right? Because, it's history. Wealthy people love recessions. Wealthy people love crashes. A lot of people suffer through them, but wealthy people love them. And that's just capitalism. Because a big reason that is because, number one, a lot of problem solvers will capitalize on their solutions, right? Look at Eric Yuan. He capitalized on the solution to being able to connect people amid social distancing, right? You look at Mark Zuckerberg. He created Facebook in 2002 in his dorm, dropped out of college. Capitalize on a solution of people in college wanting to connect with each other, right, in a way that they weren't previously able to. He saw a need and he capitalized on it. Even investors, normal people, those people that are wealthy, that are investors, professional investors, they're going to acquire undervalued assets, right? You look at the whole economy right now, the stock market is down significantly from where it was 3 months ago. I think the buy was around March 19th to the 25th, around that time, right? And during that time, it's literally America on sale. All the top corporations were on sale. All the large cap corporations that would otherwise be thousands of dollars to get into were on sale, right? Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, all on sale. And anyone could buy them. Anyone could buy them. It doesn't matter who you are. You just get a Robinhood account and you go buy them, right? Airlines were on sale. And these are corporations that they might go down in value, but they're going to come back up because they're large cap companies that are, reliable and they have strong history, right? And we just look back in history, 12 years ago in 2008, even the people that were in real estate, those investors, real estate investors, they acquired a bunch of undervalued assets during that time. And on average, since then, property values have risen on average $50,000 since then. And even last week, we had someone on the show talking about they bought the $89,000 condo in Sacramento, which if you go to Sacramento right now and go look at the market, you find an $89,000 condo and I'll pay you $89,000 if you could find a condo like that. But I'm saying that to say, like, imagine if you had bought 10 properties in 2008, right? And you held them to today. 10 properties, let's just say they all conservatively went up in value $50,000. You just increase your net worth by $500,000 because of a market crash. It's essentially that's what That's what the rich do. And then even at the worst case scenario, the rich will never, in a capitalist society, the rich will never suffer in a downturn because they get bailouts. The rich get bailouts. It's socialism for the rich. Because think about it, right? I always think about this example too, right? You let's say an employee, you work in let's say you work in New York, right? You work in a downtown office building in New York, and the owner of the office building, whatever company you work for, they go, they start struggling, they have to let you go, right? Boom, they let you go. Now you don't have an income. You go back to your apartment in, let's say, an apartment, you get evicted because you can't pay. Now, a lot of people in that apartment complex are probably in a similar situation. Let's just say in a time like we are now, right? A lot of people lose their jobs in the same apartment complex. What happens to that apartment complex? Well, now the owner's not getting his rent. Well, what happens then? He's going to get a bailout. And so I think about it in like, what is the whole purpose of a bailout, right? Because you can really relate this back to the wealth thing too. Because what happens with a bailout is let's say the economy is going down, the market is going down, and the government announces $1 trillion stimulus package for corporations. What does that mean? Well, the economy is going to come back up. So it's going to be a sudden urge. And what does that mean for the wealthy? That gives them an opportunity to get out. They can get out the market now because that surge, okay, they know it's going to go back down. So they're like, all right, I'm out of here. So the wealthy get out while the middle class, they're just told, hey, stay in there. It's going to come back up. Stay in there, though. Right? Your financial advisor tells them that. That's essentially what it is. You got nothing in this. Nothing is ever for the middle class and the poor. It's not.
I think so. The big takeaway I'm getting is that wealthy are always looking for opportunities, whether it's presented to them in the form of bailouts or whether they're seeking it themselves. Because you use terminology that most people use just in general. So you were saying things such as sale. People don't see the market crashing or going down as a sale opportunity, but they see a pair of Jordans that is listed for $80, they will go flock to it immediately because they know that because they deem that as a sale. But I say that to say that the wealthy are people just like poor middle class people. We all have a brain that says that can recognize a sale. It's just about changing your mindset to recognize certain things that you make otherwise consider as a bad thing, an opportunity. So just in your examples, you were using stock market, you use real estate. If you see the prices go down in real estate, people are trying to sell like, oh man, we have an economic crisis going on right now. I need to sell my house. Like I'm undervalued on it, or it's just like people become depressed about it. And that's synonymous with depression. It's like they have a fear that comes out of it. Whereas a wealthy person sees any type of decrease in the economic market as an opportunity for a future gain. And that's just changing your mindset. That's why we preach mindset so much, because if you have the mindset of a wealthy person, you will see things as they do and you will start to act as they do as well. And I heard a quote from Kim Kiyosaki. She said, never let a good crisis go to waste. People will hear that and probably just go crazy like, bro, how are you going to say a good crisis and let it go to waste? Like a good crisis, you're talking about people are dying by the millions. Yes, she's not saying that part. Yes, understand that this is still like a crisis situation. And she's not saying it to be cynical. Like you said earlier, it's not meant to be cynical. It's meant to be looked at as, even though we're in a bad time, what can we take away from this? It's really like looking at it in a positive sense, however you can see fit, and trying to find an opportunity. And I promise you, if you're not doing it, somebody else is doing it. Because I read a report from CNBC talking about the net worth of billionaires and how it's increased from mid-March through mid-May. And it said that their net worth has increased by overall 15%. Them making these billions of dollars should not be looked at, or they should not be frowned upon for making this type of gain during these economic crisis times. It's like change your mindset. You need to understand that they were looking for opportunities before they presented themselves. That way, when they do present themselves, they were ready to take heed to it. And that's what we're trying to preach to everybody else that we're talking to. Recognize quote unquote crisis times as opportunities, and recognize that this is a change of an era. This is literally the time where you need to be recognizing this is an opportunity.
the biggest thing about this whole thing, I mean, just going back to that question of who's going to be affected the most, the middle class, they're going to suffer. The middle class always gets destroyed in a downturn because number one, already a lot of middle class people operate as broke people, except they do middle class things. So they operate like poor people, but do middle class things, right? So they live paycheck to paycheck. Almost half of white collar workers, meaning those with, non labor jobs and non-service jobs, live paycheck to paycheck. And just looking, right? What is the number one thing the middle class do? Their pride and joy of the middle class is that precious 401k. That's their pride and joy. That whole between quarter one of 2020 and Q9 2019, the average 401k balance fell 19%. 19% because of something you can't even control. Think about like the baby boomers that are in the middle class, right? The ones that were like, whew, 2020 is my year to retire. I've been looking forward for this for 40 years. Yes, Lord. But then the coronavirus happened. And it's psych to work. You ain't going nowhere. You ain't retiring. You work until you die. And that sounds cynical, but that's the reality of what's happening. But I say that to say the middle class or the rich, I mean, they're getting out the market, right? I told you, they announced the bailout. The rich said, all right, appreciate it. I'm out. I'm out. Thanks for that bailout. I'm out. While the middle class was advised by the Fidelity financial advisor that works for Wall Street to stay in the market. They said, no, stay in there. It's going to come back up. Come on. It's not that big a deal. All right. So that's essentially what happens. The middle class, they're going to be suffering the most. And I say this to say the point of all that, of what I'm talking about with the middle class, is that you cannot save money in a 401k. That is no longer viable. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You cannot do that, right? Because the problem with a 401k is that you put your future in someone else's hands. People say, oh, invest in a 401k, invest in your 401k. It's going to come back up. It'll come back up. It's okay that it's down. It'll come back up. It always comes back up. But why am I even gambling? Why am I playing that gamble? A lot of people, they're not gonna like that. But I say that to say, like, people tell me, hey, make sure you put money in your 401k. And I honestly, that's disrespectful. Like, when people tell me, I feel disrespectful. Like, they're talking to me like I have no financial intelligence, that I'm gonna invest in a 401k. That's the reality of it. And it's not to say that the stock market is bad, right? The stock market is not bad at all. Like, because I said earlier, you can be buying things America on sale, right? But my whole thing with it is that I'm not going to put my retirement in the hands of America. Because if you're in the stock market and you're making money, with derivatives and all those things, stock options and all that, hey, you making money if the market goes up or down. That's just another money-making play to me. But if I'm putting my money in there, saving it, because you're not investing if you're putting money in a 401k, you're saving it. Saving it with the hope of it coming back up so that when I retire, I'm good money. It's dumb to me. It's just dumb. It's an industrial age thinking.
I hope we still have listeners right now. No, but understand that is just a different perspective. Like, before y'all start coming at us with pitchforks and torches, understand this is nothing but perspective. You are taught one thing when you're growing up, and it's like it cultivates into your being as your reality. But until you hear a different perspective, you never think differently. But once you hear a different perspective, what you should do instead of attacking that person is to question what he's saying. Like, maybe what he's saying has some validity to it. And so now you need to reevaluate your personal situation. Now, however, most people will just disregard everything you just said and say, nope, it's too risky to not do what I've already been taught. Now, that's because you're trying to go with the status quo of saying, okay, well, what I was taught when I was growing up was to go to school, get a job, and invest in my 401k. I was taught that from birth until now. So now that is all I know to do. And now here comes this fool 23-year-old telling me to not invest in it. So that's the initial thought. But instead of thinking like that, understand that this person has a whole different perspective. He's studied different things to think differently. So maybe instead of attacking him so quickly, say, why is he saying this? And then that's when you can start doing your own homework and realize, dang, he might have been right. Especially, you should use people like the people who are trying to retire in 2020 as the example. People now, you see how volatile the market can be and how you have completely no control over whether you retire at a certain year or not. If your plan was to retire in 2020, you SOL, because your retirement has dropped significantly. You said like 19%. And you have no control over that. And I think that, especially for that word control, like one of Alex's biggest things, if you don't have control, you literally are in the hands of somebody else. And I don't know how many people like to live their lives that way. Maybe everybody does, but I know for us, especially, we're not trying to have our lives relied upon by somebody else that's dictating our future. And we'd rather be able to control our own, because we know that we can set ourselves up for the best. And so I want to go back to the risk, though. So people are unemployed by like the 25s of millions right now. And so you were taught when you were growing up to go to school and get a job. Where are these jobs right now? Like you're taught to get these jobs as you grew up, but you're nearing 15% unemployment. In the Great Depression, that was like considered the worst time as far as the U.S. economy. They were at 24.9% unemployment. I mean, so we're nearing those levels at this point. And so why are we still considering investing in our own personal assets or starting our own businesses as risk? So it's like really no wonder why people hate on the wealthy people, because they see them taking advantage of these opportunities and getting wealthier, while we're losing jobs as middle class or poor people. And then, well, you said something. I think you're on mute. Okay. No, we're losing. I think I know what you said anyway. The middle class and the poor people are losing money, not we. Poor middle class are losing money, or becoming unemployed and are losing their 401ks, while the wealthy are just living a completely different life. So people will see that and say that that's unfair. But at the same time, if you had like spoke to somebody like Jeff Bezos back in 1990 when he was in that office starting his Amazon business, you probably would have been one of the people telling him, "Hey, bro, that's too risky. Stop trying. Just give up on that and just go ahead and go get you a job." You probably look like an idiot today if you see that Jeff Bezos' bank account.
And that's essentially the point that you're trying to make, is that look, because I don't think I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but what's happening essentially is, right, let's say, I'll say 1970, 1971. Up to that point was the industrial age, right? But since then, right, you had the computers, have all the digitalization, all that came into play, and it's kind of like culminated into something that is now turning into the information age, right? Because computers didn't start to where they were today. It wasn't quite the information age just because we had computers, right? Information wasn't accessible, right? That's essentially what the information age, right? How easily is information accessible? So the industrial age was essentially up until, I would say, about now, right? Like, this is the shift from the industrial age to the information age. It happened, yes, like the past 10 years, you could say, but coronavirus forces it. That's why that was the point I'm making earlier. If this is something, a black swan event that comes and forces change, right? And this is literally is going to be a change. And so now, just real quick too, because I want to talk about the industrial age and what that actually meant. Like, why is that old thinking, right? The industrial age was like from the early 1800s up to like the mid 1970s, right? So the 20th century. And during that time period, right, what caused the industrial age to be the industrial age? It was the advancement of coal and steam and oil and transportation and finances and the people that were able to exploit those resources like coal, steam, oil, transportation, finances, all those things became rich overnight. They became oligarchs overnight, right? And what is an oligarch? An oligarch is just someone that has a lot of money, very rich, and they have a lot of political influence as well, too, right? So we think about like the J.D. Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the Fords. Even in today's dollars, they would be extremely wealthy. We're talking hundreds of billions. I mean, Rockefeller with oil, right? And so what essentially happened when they became rich? Well, now they became wealthy. And so what does that mean? Well, they have very high tax liability now. So what is that? What is the solution to tax liability? Even today, one of the solutions is to form a nonprofit organization, right? So one of those NGOs, non-governmental organizations that have no affiliation with the government, right? You don't have to pay taxes, essentially, right? So that's a way to shelter your wealth. And also, you could develop political influence to get what you wanted, right? So if you had massive wealth and you formed in one of these nonprofits or one of these NGOs, and you had a substantial endowment to it, then you had the ability to influence politics, right? And so what happens when you're that rich at that time? I mean, you want to stay there, right? The richest people, they want to stay. They don't want to lose their wealth. Why would anyone want to lose their wealth? If I was the richest person in the world, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know. I can't really even talk like that. Those are money problems I don't know nothing about. But I say that to say, when you're at the top, you most likely want to stay there. And so how were they going to stay there? Right? So there's two ways they could have stayed there. They could have either, kept moving forward themselves and kept advancing and becoming wealthier and wealthier, or you can keep other people from catching up to you, right? And so that's where the term robber barons came from. The strategy essentially was to keep the middle class from rising through controlling the public education system in the U.S. That was their strategy to prevent anyone else from catching up to them. They could do that from controlling the school system. So in the early 1900s, right, 1905, we look at Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, all of these dudes, all these oligarchs that had hundreds of billions and millions of dollars, right? They formed what is known as the General Education Board. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about this sometimes too. The General Education Board was essentially, something that was formed to control the school system by these oligarchs, right? Because they knew they could control the masses if they can control what was being fed into them, right? So they essentially used that for influence over people. They would put money in here, and then they would provide funding for major schools all across the country, and that essentially shaped what is the current school system, right? And you think about this, right? Think about this part. What do the names like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rice, Harvard, Duke, Stanford, all of those people, what do they have in common? Those schools are all, well, I guess you look at it either way. Those names are all schools, or those schools are all named after people. It's not a coincidence that those people had influence on these schools, right? And you think about too, why is the U.S. that spends so much money relative to other nations on education, why are they so trash in education? Why are students coming out of school not knowing where Africa is? Why are students not even able to point out South America? Why is that happening? It's not a coincidence that stuff is happening. This whole thing started 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. How are they controlling these schools? How are they able to do that, right? They could control the funding. They could control the textbooks. They age segregated everything. So you create grades, right? And then you essentially create like a Pavlovian conditioning environment, right? You have 7 periods of 50-minute classes in a row with bells, right? And what do these bells symbolize? These bells are saying, hey, it's time to go to the next class. It's time to go to the next class. It's time to go to the next class. It forces you it forces reflex movement based on repetitive actions, right? So doing something over forces you to kind of get into that routine, right? It's conditioning. That stuff is not a coincidence, right? They emphasize memorization. Memorization is what school is all about. They punish you for your mistakes in school, right? When in reality, how else are you supposed to learn? How else are you supposed to learn? How does a baby learn how to walk? How does a kid learn how to ride a bike? They fall down and they get back up and they do it again. That's how you learn. That's the best way to learn. But school punishes you for that. They teach you not to do that, right? They teach you that anyone working together, you're cheating, right? You failed. And then they give you unquestionable authority figures. You cannot question my authority. If you do, I'm sending you to the principal. You get detention, whatever, right? That they're conditioning you, right? And so the whole purpose of the whole school system is to enforce conformity and kill any natural creativity or any inquisition that you might have, right? Because you think about it too. How many, like think about the young kids, right? Like when you 4 years old, you first going to school. You mad excited for school. at that age. Like, oh, I'm gonna go to school, yes. And then you get there and it's like, oh shoot, this is school. And then by 12th grade, you hate it, and most people they just hate it, right? And so this essentially teaches you it teaches you to value money as only being earned through working, because that's all you kind of see, and that's all that's taught in school. So this whole thing, what does that do to a child? It literally it tells you all you can be as an employee. That's what that whole thing is about. And I think about this too, because in that time period, 1910, there was a quote by J.D. Rockefeller, right? And he said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." This was amid him starting the General Education Board with this mindset, right? And so that's what school was all about. That's how the school system came to be about. It's not a coincidence that you don't know anything about money. It's not a coincidence. It was intentional that they don't teach you about financial literacy. It was intentional they don't teach you how to think on your own. It was intentional that they spoon feed you. It was intentional that they teach you not to fail. It was intentional about all of that. And the thing you got to take from this is that you got to know you cannot rely on anyone else for your learning. You have to put that in your own hands. That's no one else's responsibility but your own. When I had studied this and I learned about this, I damn near said that I want to put my kids in homeschool when I get kids, bro. I do not want to poison them with that garbage, bro. I think about that quote by Albert Einstein too. He said, "Do not confuse education with learning." It's not a coincidence that financial literacy isn't taught in school. It's not a coincidence that this stuff happens, bro. Don't confuse the two. It's a difference between education and learning. You're not learning in school. You're just you're taught to conform to that whole society and that production line mentality. Get with the times. That's industrial age.
All right, listen. Everybody who just listened to that, I need y'all to rewind, save it, re-listen to it. I mean, that is the epitome of why we are where we are today, as far as especially in the middle class and the poor. Because when the school system was first being formed, everybody was, or the wealthy were the ones that were in charge of that was able to fund it and get it to run the way it is today. That was the formation of the industrial age, and teaching. That was a teaching format in the industrial age. The problem is that we are changing eras and still have the same thinking as the industrial age and the information age. And there was a lot of points you made, and that's why I said just go rewind that, because there were so many things he talked about within that little section. But it's all systematic oppression. And I was thinking, so one thing you mentioned was about how people learn. People are not meant to be punished for making mistakes, but that's what school is teaching. I was thinking of that bike example. If you were, imagine getting whooped every time you fell off your bike when you were first learning how to ride a bike. How stupid would that be? Imagine if you were a baby trying to learn how to walk and you got hit every time you fell. You would probably just not even just be like, you know what, I'm not even gonna do this no more. My bad. I'm obviously doing something wrong. That sounds so counterproductive, but that is literally what school is teaching you. And so they're getting you to conform to a certain way of thinking. That way, when you grow up, you are unwilling to take risks. What you would define as risk, because now that riding that bike has transitioned to starting that business or investing in that asset. You are like, okay, I'm not going to do that, because especially if I've seen somebody else fail before doing it. Now I'm like, oh no, failure equals bad. That was what was taught to me. I'm going to go with what I know is successful, and what my parents were teaching me: go to school, go get you a nice job for 40 years, and then retire on government benefits. Use that 401k to fund your retirement. You may have to drop your lifestyle a little bit, but that's a risk you should be willing to take, because you are taken care of throughout those 40 years. This face you're making, bro, this is foolish. But yeah, and no, the way that school should be taught, honestly, was highlighted a lot in this book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. We listened to that a few months ago, and if y'all listen to that, he talks super in depth on how schools should be formatted. But unfortunately, it's a lack thereof, because if they was formatted that way, there would be 1,000 million chiefs and about five Indians in the world, because everybody would be programmed to think differently. And this is this is the epitome of what you were talking about, is that the wealthy are trying to stay at the top. was, especially back then, they were like the wealthy said, okay, we're trying to stay at the top. How do we do that? We have to keep everybody else from rising up to our level. So we're going to teach them a totally different thing than what we know to do with our money. And we'll teach our next generations, like we'll teach our personal lineage, but we're not going to teach anybody else because we want them to be the ones that work for us and build our empire for us while we're on the beach. And that's just a totally different way of thinking that people have to understand. This is what's going on. And I think I want to highlight that I don't think this could happen if if the school system was first being created today. I don't think it would have nearly the same effect because of the technology that we have available to us. And I want people to understand, because we have this technology, you don't have to fall into that system the same way that people have in years and generations before us. We have literally the power to change the narrative of all of our future generations because of what is available to us that was not available when the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts were first implementing the school system. Recognize the change in the era, because this is what's going to allow us to be able to change our narrative for our lineage moving forward. People were really trained all of their life to have somebody else take care of them. From literally birth to 4 years old, you are relying upon your parents, of course. I mean, that's a given. That's going to be happening all the time. But from 4 to 18, you're relying on that oppressed or that systematic oppression school system to take care of all of your knowledge moving forward into your adult life. And what they're teaching you is what you're going to deem as important, or what you need to, what your core values are moving forward. So once you get to be an employer or an employee, I mean, from 18 to 65, you're going to be relying on your employers to take care of you next. Because now this is what you've been taught from school. So that's why we always consider school as the foundation. That's why we put so much weight on it as like being where you get your information from. Like you need to change where you obtain your information from, because it's so vital to what you do in your adult years. Because if you're relying on a school system and for them to teach you and take care of you, then you're going to rely on that employer to take care of you from 18 to 65. And that means that you're going to probably rely on that 401k. And then from 65 to death, you're relying on the 401k and the government to take care of you. But all the while, you never took any control of your own personal finances or your own financial future, because that was never taught to you. So that means whether it's the good times or the bad times, you're relying on somebody else. And you can see that in the bad times, it can get really bad if you were relying on somebody else and you thought it was safe and secure.
I think I really like that last point you made too, when you talk about the opportunities. Now you have an option now, because before I could see if you was just conforming to the system, because you ain't had no really other options. You ain't really, it would no way you could pivot, right? Like pre-1970. So I think industrial age thinking was acceptable to an extent up to 1970, because that was the industrial age. I'd give you those, 20 years after, up to the 90s, early 2000s. It's fine, because it's like nothing. We wasn't in the information age yet, right? And this whole industrial age thinking, bro, this, what is it, right? They say, go to school, get a job, invest in your 401k, get out of debt, listen to your financial advisor, listen to your doctor, listen to the government. No, that's not the way we can do it. And look, please don't let that go over your head, that last part. I say, obviously I'm not saying don't do what your doctor says. Obviously I'm not saying don't do what the government says to do. I'm saying that to say, do your own thinking. Do your own thinking on all occasions, because you always have your best interest at mind. Nobody else will have your best interest in mind like you will. And then too, when I say get out of debt, right? When I say get out of debt, I say that to say there's good debt and bad debt. Obviously, get out of bad debt, but the whole that debt is bad, that whole thing is industrial age thinking. Debt is not all bad. So take that, and understand that. Hey, go listen to episode 6, good debt versus bad debt. Now, I say that to say that this advice is no longer applicable, that whole industrial age thinking. So essentially, it's like, you got to look at yourself, right? So today, if you're struggling right now because of the COVID thing, right? It's because you are following outdated advice. It's because you follow outdated advice. Because I can guarantee you, it's not, I'm saying this a lot, but it's not a coincidence that Steve Jobs, Gates, and Zuckerberg don't have college degrees. It's because they didn't follow industrial age advice. And millions of other people that don't have college degrees but are millionaires, right? So you got to really think about it. And so, with all this being said, there's good news and bad news, right? Good news is that this whole crisis thing is in your head. It's not real. But the bad news is that it's in your head. Right? And so you really don't let that go over your head either. Because I say that to say, if you think that it's a bad time right now, then you're right. It is. But if you see the opportunity to change, then you're right. There's opportunity to change. And that's how you gotta look at this at. Yeah. So, and as I say, that's industrial age thinking. Get out of the industrial age. The COVID thing, forcing everyone to get into information age. If you do not, you will get left behind. So let's talk about that real quick. So exactly is the information age, right? Information age is essentially the time period where you have information and knowledge as accessible as can be. Literally, in the palm of your hands, you have all the knowledge possibly that you need. Actually, yeah, guaranteed all the knowledge and tools that you need to change your life forever. And you don't have to rely on anyone else. Because you talk about all the tools, right? I think you look at YouTube, right? YouTube is probably, I think, the greatest tool that anyone has access to learn anything they want. Seriously. YouTube is insane. Like, anything you want to know anything about is on YouTube. And the fact that you can know it and learn it instantly, man, mainstream media is crushed by YouTube. Like, they're not even going to be able to compete within, as we begin the information age, you will see. Because now they have no control over any narrative. They can now it's people that are real teachers giving. I mean, obviously YouTube has fools on there too, but there's a lot of real teachers on there that are giving you the good information straight up. It's no BS or fluff or anything, right? You look at Fox, CNN, NBC, CNBC, all those people, they have hidden agendas, right? Versus YouTube people like the Rich Dad channel or London Real or Valuetainment or Bigger Pockets or Earn Your Leisures or Money Monopolizers, right? All of those people, there's nothing that we are trying to get across. We're literally just giving you the information. It's knowledge, bro. It's for free. You ain't even got to pay for it yet. It's just there. It's for free. Take advantage, because I can guarantee you it's not going to be like this forever. Even some point within the information, there will be a shift to where you will realize everything costs money now. What the heck happened? Because, I mean, we talked about the net neutrality before. That's something that could possibly happen. Who knows? Take what's on YouTube and literally change your life. You'll learn a lot more from there than you will from Harvard. Bet you that.
Bro, you ain't lying, Doc, honestly, because with the information that's available to us now, I think what the information age really is that's different from the industrial age is allowing you to take control over your financial destiny, which is what we always talk about. That's like our whole slogan in life right now is we're just taking control over what we want our financial future to look like, despite like what the industrial age had taught us prior. Just as the people who are 64, 65 right now that was hoping to be retired in 2020. And I think so now the transition to information age, that's like you were already talking about. It's about acquiring knowledge using the tools that we have available to us that wasn't available in previous generations. We have tools such as YouTube. We have tools such as Google. These are just like golden right now. You need to be taking advantage of these, like you said, Ivy League education. And the best part about it, it's literally at the palm of your hands, bro. You can access anything you want to know in this world just by a simple Google search or a YouTube search. And like you can use that to start building up business strategies, investment strategies, being able to pave your own generational wealth by I mean, this is things that we've done. Like, it's not like it's impossible or like it's only for a certain demographic. Anybody can do this. It's like the biggest thing people need to understand. And honestly, the change of an era is inevitable, whether you notice it or not. I would say the change of an era has already occurred, whether you've noticed or not. Because I think about like an example of what books have turned into. If you think about podcasts have really evolved in the past 10 years to where they are today. Because I remember personally, I used to see the first person I ever saw that did a podcast was this guy named White Boy 7th Street. Back when I used to watch Call of Duty, he used to do it's called the podcast show that he did on YouTube. Now you'd be like, bro, who finna watch these hour-long podcasts? That's dumb. But he was like that. He was doing that way before like podcasts like became really big, and now everybody's listening to podcasts. Like this is like the new books, honestly, and they've emerged as like the prominent method of education because if you think about it, podcasts are just somebody's perspective, just like books were. Books are the same thing as podcasts, except now it's pretty much instant gratification. As soon as we drop this podcast, y'all finna have instant access to it. It's not gonna be, hey, I need to go up to Barnes and Nobles and I need to place an order for it. Oh man, y'all on back order? Shoot. Okay, well I'm gonna wait 5 to 10 days for y'all to get it in stock so I can pick it up that day. Nah, bro. As soon as we drop this episode, people finna have access to it, and that's just the age that we're living in. That's the new era. That's the information age, where as soon as something is made available, anybody can access it, no matter who they are. And that's what I think we need to understand moving forward, because there are opportunities out here that people can take advantage of. They just need to be able to see it as that.
And yeah, I think that's a really good point too, because this whole shift. I personally think podcasts will overtake books as a form of what people would choose, just because podcasts you can multitask while you're listening to someone speak, and it's like a code to life, to be honest. I was talking about that yesterday to somebody. That's kind of how I see it. This whole shift, this change in era, I think it's going to be the biggest transformation in the history of the world. This will be one of the time periods talked about in the future podcasts or whatever. They're not going to be textbooks or whatever they are going to be in the future. But I think we say all this to say that if you're operating on that whole industrial age thinking after 2020, really, like after this whole thing is over, this COVID thing, if you're still on that industrial mentality of this is what you have to do, and not to say that you can't have success, but if that's all you operate on, you will work until you will die. That's just the reality of it. Like you're gonna work until you're gonna die. Like that. It sounds morbid, but the harder you work for money, the poorer you will get. And that's essentially what this means, because the rich do not work for money. The rich don't work for money. That was chapter 1 of Rich Dad Poor Dad. So this whole thing, bro, this whole time, it's time for metamorphosis. It's time for a transition. What is a metamorphosis? We all learned that word. We all heard that word in school in 4th grade, right? It's a transformation from, you hear about the butterfly and the caterpillar and all of that, or whatever, however it goes. But it's the transformation from an immature state to an adult form or mature state, right? And that's what financial literacy is. It's about a transformation in mindset, right? That's all it is. Financial literacy is nothing but a transformation in you get the right financial literacy, because there's wrong financial literacy too. And so now it's really amid the whole thing, this whole, COVID thing, whatever happens, there has to be a transformation or metamorphosis at some point, right? And the question you have to ask yourself is, what will you emerge as? Will you emerge as a victim, or are you going to emerge as an opportunist, right? Because there's a difference between the two. There's a huge difference. A victim blames the job. They blame the government. They blame Trump. They blame their parents. They blame their race. They blame everything. And not to say that any of those things shouldn't ever be considered, but those aren't the most important things. Those aren't the things that will control your life for the most part, right? Victims that's what they do. But opportunists, they realize, oh, wait, I've been looking at money the wrong way. This whole thing might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. So you have to ask yourself, what in this whole thing, like, why am I not prepared for this? What have I been doing, or what did happen to me, or what mentality have I had that didn't prepare me for this? Where did I go wrong? And you got to take responsibility for that. Don't listen to the media and the politicians saying that it's not your fault and telling you that, oh, it's okay, get another stimulus check or all this stuff. No, because it is your fault. The situation that you're in right now is because of you. Take responsibility for that. You can't change all those external circumstances, but you can change yourself, right? And you have literally the opportunity to change your life with the same thing that you're listening to this podcast on right now. So you just need to be aware that, that whole thing, that times are changing and that things are really changing right now. Because what happens is that when you become aware, you'll have a revelation. And a revelation always leads to transformation, right? Because think about think about that concept, right? If you're someone that, let's say, I mean, I just use this example. You know that working out is good, right? And that you have that information, you have that knowledge. But once your doctor tells you that, hey, if you don't change your eating habits and start working out, you will die of high cholesterol. That's a revelation, right? That's like, oh wait, that's a wake-up call, and that leads to a transformation. So you start changing your eating habits and working habits, your exercise habits, right? And that's what has to happen with the money too, and the whole financial mindset. So.
Yep, very well said. I love what you said about the victims versus opportunists, because if you place a victim and opportunist like literally side by side, it doesn't matter skin color, doesn't matter gender, doesn't matter height, weight, none of that. The only thing that's different between those two people is a mindset. And that's why we preach it all the time. Mindset is the difference between an opportunist, somebody who takes advantage of these situations, of a crisis situation, somebody that sees it as an opportunity, versus somebody who sees it as a detriment to their lifestyle, or something that is going to be just something that's just bad overall. And honestly, I was thinking back to 2008. That was a crisis time. That's when real estate market was down, and that was like a recent depression that people have gone through, a recession that people have gone through, where they can relate to. And during that time, there were opportunists that were present while everybody else was crying about it, like, oh, this is a terrible time. And that goes back to what Kim Kiyosaki said earlier, talking about never let a good crisis go to waste. If you see it as opportunity, as like an opportunist does, then you can view it in that way and take advantage of the opportunities that may be presented, that may present themselves. And that's all what comes back down to, is preparation meeting opportunity. So if you're preparing for it, you can take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. And that's all about perspective at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I want y'all to really understand what we're saying, and figure out, it's not to say that you need to go do this, or this, or A, B, C, X, Y, Z. It's all about a mindset shift. This is what this whole episode is about. It's a mindset shift of switching your way of thinking. Because like I said, when I tell people I don't invest in my 401k, they look at me like I'm crazy. They tell me I'm crazy. They laugh. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm not really tripping about it. I'm going to do what I'm doing, right? And I know what I'm doing, right? I'm starting businesses. My future. It's not the 401k. It's not my job. Could care less about that. Like that whole thing, like the people that are stuck in that mindset, those are the people that are going to be the ones in that, working for me. That's my future, right? I need 5 to 7 streams of income. That's standard for me. That's my standard. My strategy is simple. I start businesses, I get my freedom, and I put my money in real estate. Because real estate will, number one, increase my net worth, and it will shelter my wealth. That's essentially what real estate is for me. And not to say you have to copy my strategy. I would say find your own strategy, find out what you're passionate about. These are the things I'm passionate about. So find your strategy, get out of that industrial age thinking, shift to information age, and have that transformation, that metamorphosis.
At the end of the day, man, I see what you meant earlier, saying this is gonna be the best episode. This is literally a call to action for anybody that listen. If y'all listen to this all the way through, for one, props to y'all. I appreciate it. Go leave us a 5-star rating. This might be a mind changer for me, honestly. So I know somebody else should be touched by this and be able to take from this and be able to implement change into their lives. Like, this is nothing but taking control over your financial future and not relying on somebody else to pay for your retirement, to tell you how to use your money, to tell you how to build financial wealth for you and your future generations to come. And this is all we're talking about at the end of the day. And it all boils down to that one word, which is mindset. And if you change your mindset, you can then start implementing your own personal plan. Alex told you his plan, and you can develop your own plan based off of what you see can fit your personal lifestyle. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Find out what works for you and not what's been taught to you through schools, through a oppressed system. So,
yes, sir. That's it. That's what y'all gotta get from this, man. I mean, I hope y'all got a lot of value from this. Like I said, this was the culmination of my thoughts for the last really 2 months. A lot of stuff I've been thinking of. So yeah, that's it for this episode of the Money Monopolizers podcast. New episodes will be released every Thursday and will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Money Monopolizers. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we hope you learned something of value today. If you did, we'd appreciate it if you rated us 5 stars. And somebody had rated us 2 stars. Like, what did we say? Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find out more info about us on Twitter. Nah, but for real though, like, bro, if you really, come on, bro, don't give us that 5-star rating. Come on, bro. That's it. That's all I'm saying. So, anyways, you can find out more info about us on Twitter at the Monopolizers or on Instagram at the Monopolizers. We post informative content on there that'll keep you engaged. So check that out and share those. But until then, we out of here.
You've been listening to the Money Monopolizers podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. To learn more about how you can be in control of your money, visit moneymonopolizers.com. We'll catch you next time when Alex and Marlon share more personal finance and wealth creation tips with you. Now it's time to take action.